Hey everybody, we're in the California Gardenscapes again, and it's Manzanita season in a sense, which means late winter here in Southern California. Generally, January, February, we're starting to see all of these beautiful urn-shaped flowers that are either pink or white, somewhere in there, on plants that are either as big as trees or as small as this thing here. So next to me is a selected variety of Manzanita uva-ursi, and I wanted to show you this in part because Manzanitas do have a lot of garden utility if you approach them from the right varietal perspective. So this is a carpeting prostrate variety, and it'll only ever get to be maybe this tall. Really useful if it's near pathways, tucked in between big boulders like this one, or if you don't have a lot of space but want to provide some neat ericaceous flowers in your own garden. So this is a fairly common species. It actually goes all the way up to Alaska, believe it or not. But most of the species of Arctostaphylos, the genus of Manzanita, only grow in California, or at least in the California floristic province. And let's go to the other end of that spectrum here, which is Del Mar Manzanita. These naturally grow in our area and actually on our site. And this is among the rarest of the manzanitas out there. It only exists in this narrow coastal strip along these sandy bluffs in San Diego in particular, from about Carlsbad down to the Torrey Pines State Reserve. So tiny habitat for this subspecies ever in the first place, and it has since been very highly developed. So this is an important species when it comes to our work on preserving native plant species regionally here in San Diego. This is characteristic of a plant in need of help, maybe forever, and really by gardeners. So rather than just dealing with it as a preserved specimen or maintaining the living ones in our landscape that are here naturally, we're actively trying to make more of them. And I'll tell you that that's not particularly easy. We have had moderate success when it comes to rooting cuttings from this species, but that's limited in terms of the genetic diversity and what that means for the ongoing adaptive sustainability of that species in our area. We really, like I've talked about in other videos, want to be doing this work from seed. But the thing with the Del Mar Manzanita is that they don't come up from seed very readily. In fact, nobody quite understands what does trigger them to come up from seed, but it seems to have something to do with the combined fire exposure and winter exposure, some balance there, and we're actively working on figuring out more specifically what that means. So in my hand, I have a petri dish with some seeds in agar, and this is one of the groups from a big germination trial that we're doing with this Del Mar Manzanita. So these are seeds collected from our natural population on site, and we're putting them through different pre-germination exposures to things like liquid smoke, for instance. Whether or not putting them in the fridge for several weeks makes a difference, and comparing all of these things to controls in the same environment. And amazingly, we're starting to see some pretty significant patterns already. I only pulled some of the seeds out of the fridge within the last couple of weeks, but believe it or not, with our control group having 0 seeds germinated so far, we've seen interesting ticks up when it comes to exposure to smoke, which is what this one has been. Also, when it comes to cold exposure. So we're getting incredibly low levels of germination from soaking these seeds in liquid smoke for a moment before sowing them. We're also getting small amounts of germination from putting them into a moist environment in the fridge for several weeks before sowing them. And you might not be terribly surprised to hear that the combination of those two things, which somewhat mimics having a fire go over the top of the seeds, followed by a decently wet winter, which would be the natural conditions for these things to emerge in the wild, we've almost mimicked that well enough that we're actually seeing a tenfold increase in germination success from that treatment alone. So we'll share all of the big data sets at the end of this, but this is fun for me to be able to share, for one thing, because Del Mar Manzanitas are still underappreciated in our area. They're wonderful plant specimens and a reason to go out on some of the local trails if there wasn't any other. They're also a good reason to come and visit the garden here. If you walk down the overlook boardwalk to my west has big Del Mar Manzanitas surrounding it, and it's one of the most impressive displays of this rare type of manzanita anywhere. And we don't want to be the only place where you can come to a public garden and see this rare species. We really do want to continue this story by figuring out how to grow these things, doing a lot of it, and sharing them out there so that if nothing else, if tragically something like this rare species continues to decline in the wild, that at least gardens will provide a safe space for these amazing plants forever, hopefully.